Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Steady Focused. I am your host, I am your number one, Mr. SimeonHendrix. In this episode, it's a very special interview with Mr. Rex Larsen. I got him on the line. I was able to sit down and just pick his brain and go through such an amazing career. He's a 40-year veteran to the photography game, 4-0. It's just amazing. He started shooting professionally in 1977. Now, at a time where there's so many of us young guys walking around with our chests pushed out, thinking we're the rooster in the hen house because, we've got 3 years under our belt, 5 years, 10 years. This man has 40 years. So we talk about what it was like in the early 1980s to be embedded into Muhammad Ali's training camp for a week while Muhammad Ali trained for his rematch with Larry Holmes to regain his world championship belt. And asterisk with that, not only was he there doing that, but he was the only photographer and one writer. Are you kidding me? Rex talks about living a life dedicated to the craft and all the amazing experiences that he has learned and picked up along the way, struggles that he has overcome, what it was like living in a world where there was no such thing as internet as a young boy, flipping through magazines, loving photography, being inspired, then getting to the point where he is honored as Photographer of the Year through Time, Life magazine online. It's just an incredible transition going from someone who was born in 1955 and watching the evolution of technology, especially in the photography world. And here he is now thriving still 40 years into the game. Get your popcorn ready, turn your earbuds up. This is going to be just an incredible episode, lots of value. I'm honored, and I would love for you to please help me give a big, steady, focused welcome to my friend, Mr. Rex Larsen. Rex, please introduce yourself and tell us about your history.
Yeah, I'm glad to be here. And my history is a long one. A lot of young guys out there. I'm not among them. Been doing this all my life. I got started in high school on a high school yearbook taking pictures. I met a friend of my older brothers. I had a brother that's 5 years older than me, and one of his friends was a newspaper photographer, and then actually there's another guy he was friends with that was an intern at the newspaper. And this was a local paper, the Grand Rapids Press in Michigan, the Grand Rapids Press, second largest newspaper in the state. And it was actually the intern. I asked to see his work. I wasn't even in high school yet. I think I was in ninth grade, and he pulled out one of those portfolio cases, showed me black and white pictures, pretty much all people pictures, candid people pictures, and I just thought they were the greatest things, and it would interest me so much. I've always been a creative person, but I was really drawn to the photography and looking at these glossy prints, 8x10s, 11x14s. I thought they were just huge. I asked him, how I could learn to do that and how I could get involved. And he suggested when I went to high school, started in 10th grade, to get involved in either the school newspaper or the yearbook. And I was able to get involved in a yearbook class, hoping there would be someone there to teach me photography. Instead, they handed me some old darkroom equipment and an old SLR camera and an extra lens. I thought this stuff was just the fanciest gear ever, and began a journey really of teaching myself photography. There was really no one to teach me. I set up a dark room in the family bathroom, started reading everything I could get my hands on. All the, there's a lot of photography magazines back then, Popular Photography, Modern Photography, so many others, and just read everything I could. In fact, I would save the issues because as I reread them, my capacity to learn and understanding grew, and so I would just hang on those issues and reread them until I understood more, and got involved in photography in college. At the college newspaper, I had to cover anything and everything, but it really gave much more purpose to my photography work, because I had the challenge of really coming back with the goods. When you're just shooting for yourself, if things don't work out so well, it doesn't matter that much. But with a newspaper, whether it's a small college newspaper or it's a big time daily, you have to come back with the goods. You have to solve all the problems. At college, the newspaper actually offered me a job. I had never submitted a portfolio. I never applied for a job. I did shoot a few assignments for them, and they had a contest, and I won most of the awards in their first annual contest. So that brought me to their attention. But without applying, they offered me a job, and I rose to become chief photographer and stayed there for 36 years.
How does it feel? The evolution, from film to now you're putting your photos on Instagram, and the continual development of the technology. Does it feel like, oh man, I wish this would just not happen, or are you excited by it? Do you embrace it?
The change has been somewhat gradual, and so I sort of eased into it like so many others. But I'll tell you an interesting story that puts this in a little bit of context. It was just a few years ago. I was fortunate to be honored by what used to be Life magazine, is now life.com. They just have an online presence, but for years that was a premier magazine in the country. And they had the Best Pictures of the Year feature, and it wasn't really something you enter like a contest, but they keep an eye on work that's published around the world, and they selected one of my pictures as one of the top pictures of the year, which was quite a thrill. What I told them is really kind of interesting in the context of your question. I told them, I said, never did I imagine that as a boy, sitting on the edge of my bed, leafing through Life magazine and marveling at the pictures in there, that years later I would have a picture published by them that was taken with a camera that didn't use film and that could be seen only on a computer via the internet. All those things that didn't exist when I was a boy, marveling at the pictures and the great photographers of Life magazine. And here I am, published by them using a digital camera, and the images could only be seen, electronically on this thing that, of course, it's ubiquitous now that we're so familiar. It's a big part of our life, the internet. The challenges of making great pictures really haven't changed that much, but the tools we use to capture them and the way they're shared has changed significantly.
It's fall, Deer Lake, Pennsylvania, in a secluded wooded camp. Muhammad Ali was training to reclaim the heavyweight championship from Larry Holmes. And you are there photographing him. Talk to me. What is that like, looking back on it now and also in the moment in 1980?
I spent a week with Ali as he trained to try to reclaim his championship title from Larry Holmes. And the times were so different than now. There was no big entourage around him at the time. There was no other media. There were no sort of media handlers or PR people that you'd have now. It was just me, the writer, him and his people at his camp. And even the setting was really something. It's very rustic. It was up in the foothills of Deer Lake, Pennsylvania. There was a little town down below. And on his compound, the buildings looked like small log cabins. They had a larger building where his ring was for training and sparring. They had a larger building. It was like a mess hall that on the outside looked like a giant log cabin. Smaller cabins where the fighters slept. He stayed apart from his family, and he stayed by himself in one of these small cabins. In fact, I had only been there only just a few minutes, introduced him. He invited me into his cabin, and he says, "Come on in, Rex." He says, "I want to watch the news. I loves to watch the news." And he brought me in and, sat down with Ali, and he had one of these old big screen TVs, started flipping through the channels, and we kind of settled back in these recliners while he was sort of taking a break and relaxing, and got acquainted with me in the most informal way. And that was the start of a week of in the mornings eating breakfast next to him, in the afternoons photographing training and sparring sessions, and him goofing around and working with some of the younger fighters that trained under his auspices, and some of his trainers, and it resulted in a really great set of pictures.
Wow. I mean, just hearing you talk about that, you can hear, or you can, you see that you have such a vivid photographic mind. And when you retell the story, you're there, and I imagine inside of your head, those images are just as crisp and just as in focus, correct exposure as the ones that you have on, like you said, your Instagram.
If I may add just quickly, Simeon, the key word you said is there. And really, the most important thing is access. You can be a great photographer. You can have great equipment. You can have all those things going for you, but you really have to be there. You have to have access, whether it's behind the scenes or backstage or in the room or wherever things are going on. Many great, photographers and photojournalists get access to really dangerous situations, really risky situations, whether it's violence and war, or it's risky extreme weather, or any number of things. But it's access that really separates the great photographers from the others, regardless of the equipment and the technology.
10,000 shoots, over 10,000 photo assignments in your career, with such a heavyweight champion, literally, of Muhammad Ali in your portfolio. What are some other assignments that come to your mind that you say, "Oh my gosh, I can't believe I was there," or maybe you feel so, overjoyed that you were there and you did capture that? Like, looking back on it, you say, "I'm so proud of this moment that I was able to capture."
I've had a vast number of opportunities at a medium-sized daily. We were, the press wasn't as big as the Detroit newspaper, but offered me a lot of opportunities. And actually, some of the great opportunities are really small, poignant moments in my community, whether it's a birth of a child or a death or a soldier being buried or someone being, rescued or life being saved at a fire or car accident. These really kind of smaller things that don't take on a larger, a grander scale in the scheme of news around the country. But there have also been, bigger opportunities. One of the biggest for me in my career actually came later in my career when, as a chief photographer, I was assigned to travel to Washington, D.C., and cover one of several funerals for the late President Gerald Ford, who's from Grand Rapids in western Michigan. So I went there for a week when his body arrived and was brought up the Capitol steps and light in state in the National Rotunda. And his wife, the former First Lady, and their children paid respects. I have that on my website. They had a a funeral service at the National Cathedral. So you had all the past presidents, all the political leaders and then world leaders from around the globe were there. And then I was there really pressed literally shoulder to shoulder with some of the greatest photographers in the country and the world that I had grown up admiring. And I was there side by side having the same challenge to come back with great pictures. And that was a really, really important story for the state of Michigan and Western Michigan, where the paper is based. But I've had so many opportunities. I've flown with fighter pilots and experienced zero gravity while doing a story on a fighter pilot. I did a long project on heart transplantation and organ harvest. So a lot of opportunities. I used to go to New York twice a year, shoot fashion. In the springtime, I'd go and shoot the fall collections during Fashion Week, and during the fall, I'd go shoot the spring collections and photographing the world's top fashion designers, and again, be rubbing elbows with some of the top fashion photographers. So, and then I'd come back to to West Michigan and be doing more community-based photojournalism.
40 years of a professional veteran photographer, and the younger guys, myself included, that we're looking at 3-5 years, 10 years, maybe some of us. John Gress, we talked with him a couple of weeks ago, and he's 16 years. But when we look at 40 years, I mean, that is long game. That is long game. And what has been for you one of your biggest struggles?
I've always tried to set a really high standard. I feel that during my time at the newspaper, I always believed that the readers there should get a quality that is no less than they'd get in a Time magazine or National Geographic or New York Times or any publication. That just because it's a medium-sized paper, they shouldn't expect any less. So for me, if there's any, to use your word, kind of struggle or challenge, it's to really to be great all day long and every day. And sometimes I'd shoot one assignment a day, sometimes several, sometimes I'm working on a long project. But it's that challenge to rise to a level of greatness, and I put a lot of pressure on myself.
What was editing like on film?
One thing I like now with my digital Canon camera, it has a button that I can push, and I can mark a frame, or you can even rate it, or I can push a button once or 4 times. And so sometimes, if time permits, if I'm shooting a sporting event or news event and I get a great picture, I will mark that. Or if I'm shooting a basketball game, there's a timeout, I'll sit down, I'll look at the back of my camera, and I'll quickly pick some key pictures, and I'll tag those. And then maybe at halftime or at the end, I can pull up those tagged pictures and see my top 5, 6, 7, 8 pictures. So that'll speed it up. And that's different from the film days. In the old days, I'd be holding a strip of negatives up to a light table and looking, pulling it through my fingers and looking at it with a magnifying glass. And I'd use a paper punch along with my colleagues. We'd use a paper punch, and we'd put a little notch in the sprocket holes on the side of the film. So then when we put the film in the enlarger, the uncut long roll of film, we could feel along the edges. When we felt that notch, we'd know that was one of our selects, and we'd pop that in and make a print, often, on deadline. So certainly there are some changes there. Some things fundamentally haven't changed, and others really have, as I described.
What's been over your career, number one thing that sticks out to you as like the biggest lesson learned, or maybe the number one rule that you would tell to someone who is younger in their development of their career?
Just to witness life and to document life, really sort of behind the scenes, and all its pain and glory has really been a great experience for me, and has helped me really grow as a human and a man. And so that's really been really the greatest thing is just these rich experiences I've had with humanity. To the second part of the question, as far as sharing with other photographers, what I would say the best thing people can do is expose themselves to really high quality work, and we have opportunities the vast compared to when I was young with the internet, that we can see so much photography. And when I talk to young photographers, I tell them to expose themselves to the really great photography so they can set a high standard for their work. And if you aspire to the highest standards and you fall short, you're still doing pretty good.
There we go. And Rex, it's been an honor for me as a student to pick your brain and hear from you. Any final thoughts?
Well, this is fun, Simeon. Photography is my favorite subject. As you can tell, I like to talk about it. It's interesting, and I'm immersed in it every day. I'm looking at photography online and meeting people like you. And you mentioned John Gress. He's become an online friend, so I'm always looking at great work and benefiting from changes in equipment and technology. So it's fun to talk about it, and I enjoy meeting people that share my interest. And if people want to contact me at rexlarsenphoto@gmail or reach me through my website, I'm happy to answer questions. I don't have all the answers. I have more questions than answers, but I'm happy to share and help people. And I reach out to other photographers as well to learn and to grow from those who have more experience than I do and greater skills. So the learning never ends.
Amen. And I can only hope and pray that when I'm, in your shoes, that I still have a hunger for knowledge and learning and continued growth. What an amazing, amazing man. Please make sure to check him out at rexlarsen.com. You can also look him up on Instagram, Rex Larsen. That's REXLARSEN. Rex Larsen. He's the man. Of course, you can peruse all over on steadyfocused.com/24. And we've got pieces of his portfolio and a write-up of this interview. So I love you guys. Keep tuning in. I'm going to keep hitting you with episodes. Let me know people you would like to be interviewed or things you'd like to see covered in an upcoming episode. Because without you, Steady Focused is just meh. Until next time, I am your number one, Mr. SimeonHendrix, and this is Steady Focused.